I was halfway through planting the third red maple when I heard the screech of tires and the unmistakable sound of HOA fury approaching. I didn't even bother looking up, I already knew who it was. "Stop right there, mister." "Lancaster," came the screechy voice of Marlene Jennings, the HOA president and full-time neighborhood tyrant. She marched toward me like she owned the ground she waddled over, blonde bob stiff in the wind, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. I wiped sweat from my forehead and leaned on my shovel. "Morning, Marlene. You're just in time to see the roots go in. You are in violation of the HOA landscaping policy," she barked, jabbing a finger toward my freshly dug holes. "You didn't submit a tree addition form, and these are non-approved species. I'm going to have to issue a citation," I laughed. "I'm not in the HOA, Marlene. We've had this conversation." "Yes, well," she sniffed, "your street was annexed last month. The board voted." "It's official," I raised an eyebrow. "You voted to annex a street you don't own. That's when it happened." A beige Ford Explorer came tearing around the corner, HOA logo slapped on the doors like they were the real deal. Out hopped two guys in matching navy polos, cargo pants, and God help me plastic badges. One of them barked, "Step away from the shovel, sir." I blinked. "Excuse me," the taller one, who looked like he got rejected from mall cop training, added, "You're under citizen's arrest for vandalism of HOA property and defying a directive from the board." Marlene folded her arms with the self-satisfaction of a cat who just knocked a glass off the counter. "I warned you, Aaron. You brought this on yourself." "You're joking," I said, genuinely unsure if I was being pranked. The short fake cop reached for my arm. "Sir, we're going to have to detain you until a real officer arrives." I stepped back. "Touch me again, and you'll have a real legal problem on your hands." Now, I'm not one to escalate things unnecessarily, but I don't take kindly to threats on my own property, especially not when I know something they clearly don't. "You might want to check with the county records office before you go around pretending to arrest people," I said calmly, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Because I own this street," Marlene scoffed. "That's absurd." "You sure?" I tapped my screen and pulled up the deed. This street wasn't built by the developer. It was privately paved back in the 80s by the previous owner of this lot. When I bought the house, I bought the road with it. It's right here in the legal description. I held it out. Marlene didn't even look, she just waved her hand like I was waving a dead fish at her. The fake cops exchanged glances. The tall one looked less sure now. "Wait, if this isn't HOA property, you can't do anything," I interrupted. "You just tried to arrest a man on his own land for planting trees. That's attempted false imprisonment. You two better start walking before I press charges." Marlene turned red, then purple. "You can't talk to me like that. I am the HOA," I grinned. "And I'm the guy who's about to make sure the county knows this HOA is trying to enforce authority where it has none." The fake cops backed away slowly, muttering something about a misunderstanding. Marlene stood there sputtering, her clipboard trembling. I went back to planting my trees. The shovel sank into soft earth again, but my focus was gone. I kept glancing down the street, expecting Marlene to reappear with another batch of impersonators. But the Explorer was gone, and her shrill voice had finally vanished with it. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood was quiet. I finished mulching the base of the last maple and went inside to wash off the dirt. On my way in, I passed the mailbox where an envelope taped to the side caught my eye. No postage, just a folded letter typed in block font with a seal I didn't recognize. I opened it there on the porch. Inside was some kind of notice of violation escalation, whatever that meant, with something called an emergency compliance hearing scheduled for next Tuesday. There was no location, no signature, just a phone number and the same seal. A triangle with a house inside and the letters GHA. I frowned. This wasn't from the HOA I knew. It was some offshoot or worse, a completely fake entity. But they were using printed stationery, official-looking graphics, and even legal-style jargon. Someone was going to a lot of trouble to make this look legitimate. I went inside and opened my laptop. A reverse search on the phone number led nowhere. It wasn't registered to any business or public record. I dug deeper. Search the county's database for any legal filings connected to GHA. Nothing. No incorporation, no tax ID, no mention in city zoning. It flat out didn't exist. I called a friend of mine, Carla, who works in the city attorney's office. When I read her the language from the notice, she paused for several seconds. "That's not legal terminology," she said finally. "It sounds like someone trying to write like a lawyer without actually knowing how." "You said they used a seal," I described it. "That's not any registered city or county entity. If they're sending those out, they're impersonating a government authority. That's a felony." My stomach turned. "And they tried to arrest me earlier." "Two guys in branded uniforms, badges, the whole deal." Carla didn't hesitate. "That's criminal impersonation. And if they so much as touched you, that's assault under false legal pretenses. You need to report this." Now, I hung up, took a few photos of the letter, and drove straight to the sheriff's station. Lieutenant Ramirez met me in the lobby. I'd worked with him years ago on a zoning dispute when I was on the county's infrastructure board. He was sharp, and more importantly, he didn't like bullies. I laid out the letter, then showed him the body cam footage from my doorbell camera. It had caught nearly everything the Explorer rolling up: the fake badges, Marlene's declaration, and the attempt to grab my arm. He watched it twice. "Those guys aren't on any city payroll," he said flatly. "And this seal, that's pure fabrication. They're imitating legal authority with no jurisdiction." He stood up. "We're launching an investigation. If they've sent this to you, they've probably sent it to others." I nodded. "I'll check with my neighbors." By the time I got home, Ramirez had a unit canvassing the area. A cruiser was parked near the corner and 2 officers were going door to door. I flagged them down and asked if anyone else had received the same letter. One officer, a younger guy named Torres, nodded. "7 homes so far, all on your street. They're targeting this block specifically." I looked down the lane. My street was small, 9 houses in total, all built on privately owned land that had fallen outside the HOA's original jurisdiction. The others had probably just tossed the letters, not realizing the implications. I knocked on each door personally, explaining what was going on. Most were surprised. A few were angry, but everyone agreed to give statements. One woman, Denise, had actually called the number and been told she'd be fined up to $5,000 for leaving her trash bin out past 7 p.m. "They were aggressive," she told me, clutching the phone log. "Said if I didn't pay the fine, they'd refer me to municipal enforcement." I was scared. I took her statement and sent it to Ramirez. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a camp lantern and a thermos of coffee, watching the street. Around midnight, a dark SUV crept past, lights off, slow and quiet. I jotted down the plate and called it in just in case. The cruiser had left hours earlier, but I wasn't taking chances. The next morning, Ramirez called. We ran the plates, registered to a private security firm in Edgehill. "Not licensed for law enforcement, not even for patrol," I exhaled. "So they're pretending to be cops. How deep is this going?" He didn't answer right away. "That's what we're going to find out." By Friday, things escalated. A search warrant was executed at the HOA's clubhouse, a 2-story building near the neighborhood pool that Marlene had turned into her personal command center. Officers hauled out boxes of documents, hard drives, and a stack of those fake violation letters. And then came the kicker. Inside a locked filing cabinet, they found a forged annexation map falsely stamped with the county engineer's seal. It showed my entire block as part of the HOA, including a signature that wasn't mine but was labeled as if it were. Ramirez called me in. "There's evidence Marlene's been submitting fabricated maps and forging compliance reports to the board," he said. "She created an internal unit called GHA, an enforcement wing she claimed had legal backing. The 2 guys who came after you. Hired through an unlicensed firm she contracted personally and paid under the table." I stared at the file. "She forged my signature, yours and 3 other property owners. We're charging her with document fraud and impersonating a public official. The 2 men will be charged with unlawful detainment and impersonation." I nodded slowly. "What about the HOA itself?" "That's the tricky part," he admitted. "Technically, the board didn't authorize this. She created the GHA without a vote." Half the board didn't even know it existed. I leaned back. So they let her run unchecked. For now, we're freezing all HOA enforcement actions. County oversight is stepping in. There will be a meeting next week. You're invited. The following Tuesday, I stood at the front of the community center. The room was packed. Ramirez sat off to the side, arms crossed. The rest of the HOA board looked like they were waiting for a meteor to hit. Marlene wasn't there. She'd been arrested that morning. I cleared my throat and held up the forged annexation map. This was submitted without consent. It was used to justify threats, fake fines, and even physical intimidation. This isn't about landscaping. This is about someone trying to seize control of private property through lies and fear. A murmur rippled through the room. I continued. Every resident on my street has submitted written testimony. We've confirmed at least 10 fraudulent notices. Every single one came from inside that building. One of the board members, a man named Greg who ran a landscaping business, stood up. I didn't know about this. None of us did. She kept us out of it. That's the problem, I said. You didn't look. You gave one person unchecked power and never asked questions. A few heads nodded. Another woman, Sarah, stood. I move that we dissolve the current board and appoint a temporary oversight committee until we can hold a new election. Applause erupted. That night, the motion passed. The board was suspended. County oversight stepped in. The fake HOA cops were formally charged and Marlene faced multiple felonies. As for me, I planted 2 more trees the next weekend. No one stopped me, and the best part. I submitted a proposal to the county to formalize my street's private status. It passed. Now there's a sign at the end of the block. Private road, no HOA jurisdiction. Just the way it should be. 2 weeks after the community meeting, I stood at the edge of the cul-de-sac, watching a county crew install the last of the new street signage. It wasn't much, just a green metal plate with white letters, but the words were clear and final. Private road, no outside enforcement. A quiet line in the dirt, but one backed by law, clarified through a series of municipal filings. A neighbor, Ron, walked up carrying a box of donuts, his carpenter's apron still slung around his waist. They finally finish, just now, I said. No more mystery fines or clipboard patrols, Ron grunted. Still can't believe she forged county documents. That takes guts or no brains. I didn't respond. My phone buzzed, unknown number. Hello, this is Deputy Inspector Lyle Barton, said a gravelly voice. I'm following up on a matter referred to us last week involving unauthorized use of municipal emblems and impersonation of law enforcement. I stepped away from Ron and toward the sidewalk. Yes, I filed the original complaint, Aaron Lancaster. We've completed our preliminary investigation. We'd like you to look at some photographs and verify whether any of these individuals were present the day you were approached. Where do you need me? District 3 Substation, Conference Room A, come in tomorrow morning. The next day, I sat across from a corkboard lined with photos. Most were low-res stills from surveillance or traffic cams, but 2 stood out headshots of the 2 men who'd tried to detain me. Their names were scribbled underneath, Curtis Danner and Wayne Hodge. Recognize them? Barton asked. I nodded. They're the ones who stepped out of that Explorer. He took notes. Both men were hired through an unregistered security outfit calling itself Civic Enforcers LLC. It doesn't exist legally. No tax filings, no insurance, no license. But we found payment records tied to a personal account belonging to Marlene Jennings. She paid them herself, out of a separate checking account, not tied to the HOA's official budget. She funneled over $20,000 through incremental payments labeled Grounds Maintenance Consulting. I leaned back. So she created a fake security firm and staffed it with people who thought they had arrest powers. Not quite. One of them, Curtis Danner, holds a suspended private patrol license from another state. He was banned from offering services after a fraud charge in Arizona. The other has no background in security. He worked in pest control. Barton slid a file toward me. We're charging them both with impersonating an officer, conspiracy to commit unlawful detainment, and practicing security services without a license. Jennings is looking at accessory charges on top of her existing counts. I flipped the file open. Inside were photocopies of handwritten notes recovered from Marlene's office. One sheet was labeled Compliance Pathway Phase 2. It outlined plans to expand the governing housing authority into a broader enforcement network across adjacent neighborhoods. She wanted to create an HOA police department, I said aloud. Barton nodded. She drafted a charter for it, even listed command titles. She was going to call herself Chief Regulatory Officer. I closed the folder. How did no one on the board know? She communicated through private email accounts, used burner phones, and listed her own home as the address for civic enforcers. It was a solo operation. The board was negligent but not complicit. As I left the station, I passed a local reporter waiting in the lobby. She recognized me instantly. "You're the guy with the private road, right? The one they tried to arrest," I hesitated. "Yeah, that's me. Mind going on record? We're doing a piece on rogue HOAs and enforcement fraud." I agreed under one condition, that no names from my street be published without consent. She took notes, asked detailed questions, and thanked me before hurrying out. By the weekend, the story hit the regional news. The headline: Fake HOA Police, Suburban Power Grab Ends in Felony Charges. The article outlined the whole mess: fabricated enforcement units, impersonation, a forged annexation map, and the failed attempt to create a shadow governance structure. It spread fast. I received calls from people in other neighborhoods, asking how they could verify their own HOA's legitimacy. Some even asked how to buy their street if it wasn't already public. Then came the subpoenas. I was called to testify before a grand jury reviewing Marlene's conduct. Not just for the impersonation scandal, but for deeper financial misconduct. Apparently, investigators found another account, this one connected to community renovation funds. Over $50,000 had vanished over 2 years, redirected through falsified invoices. In court, I sat behind the prosecution's table as the jury reviewed physical evidence. I wasn't allowed to speak during the first session, but I watched as a forensic accountant laid everything bare. Marlene had created fake vendor names, generated fake receipts, and paid herself under the guise of property beautification. One listed charge: environmental aesthetics consultation, $8,750. The prosecutor stood. "And was any work associated with these payments ever completed?" "None," the accountant replied. "No permits, no contractor reports, no visible changes to the properties listed in the expenditures." When I was finally brought up as a witness, the questions were direct. "Did you ever authorize inclusion into the HOA?" "No." "Did you ever sign any document agreeing to annexation?" "Never." "Were you ever informed of GHA or its function?" "No." I found out when they tried to detain me. After my testimony, I left the courthouse and walked to a coffee shop around the corner. Inside, I found Sarah from the former board already seated. She waved me over. "We disbanded the board formally this week," she said. "We're holding elections in 3 months under county supervision. No one's allowed to run who held office during Marlene's tenure." I nodded. "Good. There's more," she added. "We're turning the clubhouse into a community-run co-op. No enforcement powers. Just a space for events, classes, meetings. No one wants a board anymore." I sipped my drink. "That's for the best." She hesitated before continuing. "The county's also drafting new regulations. After what happened, they're proposing limits on HOA authority, mandatory transparency, annual audits, and clear boundaries of jurisdiction." "They should have done it years ago," I said. She looked away. "We were asleep at the wheel." "No," I told her. "You trusted someone who abused it. That's not your fault, but now you know better." Later that week, I received a letter from the prosecutor's office. Marlene had agreed to a plea deal, 4 felony charges, including fraud, impersonation of a public official, and falsification of government documents. She'd serve 18 months and pay restitution. Danner and Hodge were each sentenced to house arrest and probation, barred from working in any security-related fields again. I stood at the edge of my property that evening, staring down the newly posted sign. The trees I'd planted had started to bud. A few kids rode their bikes past, weaving between the shadows of the branches. The street was quiet now. Not silent, but peaceful in the way a place becomes when people stop looking over their shoulders. Ron's voice broke the calm. You know, I was thinking about putting in a bench under that tree. I turned. Do it, it's your street too, he laughed. Funny how we had to go through all that to remember that. I didn't respond. The bench would look good there. And this time, no one was coming to tear it out. The following month brought a different rhythm to the neighborhood. Without Marlene's constant disruptions, people began using their front yards again. Kids played basketball in driveways. Garden beds sprouted up along fences. Porch lights stayed on longer. There wasn't a single flyer taped to doors, no warnings tucked into mailboxes, no strangers in polo shirts pacing the sidewalks with clipboards. But something didn't sit right. One afternoon, I was sorting through documents for a permit I'd requested to widen my driveway when I noticed a pattern in the county's online records. Several property improvement requests had been flagged or delayed over the past 2 years, all from homes on our block, and all flagged by the same third-party reviewer. The name listed, GHA, Compliance Liaison. That title shouldn't have existed in the county system. I drove to the zoning office and asked to speak with a records supervisor. A woman named Deanna met me in a back office surrounded by filing cabinets and dusty ordinance binders. I showed her the flagged permits and the reviewer credentials. These aren't supposed to be here, she said, pulling out a binder to cross-reference the credentials. There's no GHA account authorized to access this system, let alone to flag applications. Someone had back-end access, I said. They embedded fake authority into the system. She tapped a few keys and frowned. This account was created 18 months ago. Whoever set it up used internal admin credentials, county level. I stepped back. You're saying someone inside the zoning department helped them? She didn't answer right away. Then she picked up the phone and called her supervisor. By the next morning, the county launched an internal audit. The fraudulent account had reviewed over 40 zoning applications blocking approvals, adding false compliance notes, and in some cases, rerouting fees into a third-party processor. That processor didn't belong to the county. It was a shell company registered to an address in Sanderson, 2 towns away. The sheriff's office was brought back in. Detective Ramirez returned to my street, not to investigate Marlene this time, but to probe possible collusion between county employees and the fake enforcement group. He met me on my front steps late in the evening. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, clipboard tucked under one arm. We've got a new angle, he said. That shell company you flagged, it's called Parkline Civic Services. The same company shows up on landscaping invoices, community maintenance charges, and even in a few redirected homeowner dues. Let me guess, I said. Marlene again, partially, she was a director, but the filings list a second name, someone who worked quietly behind the scenes, Preston Vickery. He's a systems analyst in the city's digital infrastructure office, had access to zoning software, payment processing, and property databases. My jaw tightened. You think he helped create the fake enforcement branch? He built the backend. We found emails between him and Marlene discussing expanding enforcement visibility and digitally legitimizing oversight. They used county resources to make their fake HOA look official. How deep does it go? Ramirez flipped a page. Deep enough that we've got federal interest. The moment they manipulated public systems for private gain, they crossed into wire fraud and computer crime territory. 2 days later, federal agents raided Vickery's home in Sanderson. They seized multiple laptops, external drives, and a desktop server tower he'd been running from his garage. Inside, agents found a mirror of the county's permit database copied and altered, complete with false review logs and forged digital signatures. The indictment came swiftly. Vickery was charged with unauthorized intrusion into public systems, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit extortion, and use of government seals without authorization. He'd worked quietly for over a year, siphoning off money from fake fines, blocking permits to coerce compliance, and feeding Marlene data to help her justify targeting specific homes. When the news broke, it was the lead story on every channel. Digital coup in the suburbs. how two locals hijacked city systems to enforce fake HOA laws. I was called in to testify again this time before a joint task force managing cybercrime cases. They wanted to know how the scheme had gone unnoticed for so long. I told them, people assumed it was real because it looked real. The letters had seals. The emails came from addresses that sounded official. Even the fines had links that looked like government portals. The tech team traced the payment processor's transactions. Over $200,000 had been funneled through Parkline Civic Services into personal accounts. Some of that money came from confused homeowners who thought they were paying real citation fees. The county refunded every last cent. Meanwhile, the former HOA board was summoned to a second hearing not for criminal charges, but for civil review. They were asked to justify how Marlene had been allowed to operate without oversight. Most resigned outright. A few offered to testify against her in exchange for immunity. At that same hearing, Sarah and several others pushed forward a reform package. A neighborhood charter that eliminated all enforcement authority and stripped any future board of the power to issue fines, citations, or impose restrictions without a 2/3 vote from all residents. It passed unanimously. A week later, I received a certified letter from the county. It declared my street permanently excluded from all HOA jurisdiction, present or future. The private easement was officially recognized, and any attempts to annex or regulate the property by private entities would be considered trespassing. Preston Vickery pled guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Marlene took a plea deal 4 years, with a 10-year ban from serving on any residential board or community planning group. The fake cops, Danner and Hodge, were ordered to perform 2,000 hours of community service under the supervision of real officers. Their mugshots were plastered across every local paper. Ron stopped by a few days later, sliding a cold bottle of lemonade across my porch table. "Congratulations," he said. "You didn't just win, you rewrote the rulebook." I shook my head. "I just wanted to plant some trees," he laughed. "Well, now they're growing in the safest place in the county." We sat in silence for a while, watching a few kids toss a football between yards. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass, and far off, someone was barbecuing. A new sign had gone up at the entrance of the neighborhood, not a regulation or a warning, just a plaque mounted to a brick garden bed that read, "Community first, fear last, no fake authority allowed." It wasn't official, no ordinance backed it, but it didn't need to be. A neighbor named Leela walked by with her dog. She waved. "No more HOA nonsense," she asked. "Gone," I said. "Root and branch," she smiled. "Good, I'm building a chicken coop next week." Ron raised his bottle. Freedom tastes like eggs, apparently. I leaned back in my chair, the maples swaying gently overhead. Not one of them had been touched. Their leaves rustled in the wind like a quiet laugh at everything that had come before. Everything was finally where it belonged.